Welcome to episode 32 of the Toadstool Boardroom for the week of February 22nd, 2023. My name's Logan Plant, and I'm joined today by Chris Shriver.
Good evening or morning, wherever you're listening to this.
Nice. That was very NPR of you.
That was. Yeah, I guess it was NPR-ish.
And a new member joins the boardroom. Please welcome Justin Koreis. Hi, Justin.
Hey,
Logan. Hey, Chris. What's going on?
What's up, bud?
Justin's going to be occupying the third chair for the next few weeks, kind of as a trial run, see if he can stand us for an hour every week, and if we can stand him. And if all goes well, he'll hopefully be in the boardroom for the long haul. So we're happy to have you, Justin.
I'm excited to be here. I love talking video games. I love Nintendo. This is going to be great.
So let's get to know you real quick. We got a lot to get to this week. Pokemon Presents is happening next week. Some Nintendo franchise that some love, some hate is turning 30 years old this week. And we've got some Call of Duty news to talk about. Sorry, it's Star Fox. We're going to talk about Star Fox. I've given it a hard time on this show in the past. But first, let's get to know Justin. I want to know your favorite Nintendo console, your favorite Nintendo game, series, character, and maybe your favorite game outside of Nintendo as well.
Okay. Yeah, we can do that. So, I'm a little bit older. I was born in the mid-'80s, so I was very much a part of that generation. As a result, like a lot of people around my age, I am a Super Nintendo kid. I had the NES, but what the SNES did blew it out of the water. I think to this day, the Super Nintendo Entertainment System is the greatest console ever made with the greatest library on the planet. So, number one, that's my favorite console. My favorite series, easy one.
Nice.
There you go.
That's
has
a
to be
Ganondorf shirt for those
not watching. Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the silently pointing at myself, probably not good for radio. I'm a huge Legend of Zelda fan, and a lot of that has to go with exactly that. You know, I played the original Legend of Zelda on that gold cartridge, which just looked like it was something beyond everything else available. I used to rent The Legend of Zelda: A Link from the Past from the grocery store back when you could do those things, and I would do it all the time. You would rent it, you would make a bunch of progress, you'd return it, somebody else would play it, delete your saves, you'd cry, you'd move on with your life. So I played through that game dozens and dozens of times for a very, very long time. That was on my short list for favorite games of all time. Eventually, I actually supplanted Link to the Past with Twilight Princess as my favorite Zelda game,
Good
and then
man.
kind of de facto Zelda game. And I know that you and I are in alignment on that. I also know that it can be a divisive choice, and there's a lot of things that I think it does better than any other game in the series before or since. It's so cinematic. There's like a Western shootout in a town full of cats. Like literally, what more could you ask from a video game? Between like duels on bridges, and I think the most impactful final fight against Ganondorf and Ganon in the series, it's amazing. And I thought that was going to stand the test of time until Breath of the Wild. So Zelda's my favorite series. I think Breath of the Wild is the best video game. Like, period at the end of that sentence. There's, I don't know how many video games in the world. I think that is the best one. And so that's sort of my de facto favorite video game and series right there.
I want to speak to that for a second because, on our 3D Zelda retrospective we did back with Odell, I said Twilight Princess was my favorite. I still stand by that
Great
today.
Call.
But I am replaying Breath of the Wild right now. I thought I was just going to play the Great Plateau again to scratch that itch, but then I've just kept going. And
I told you not to do it.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I am enjoying it more than I did 6 years ago. I really am.
Wow.
And I think that I may have been giving it a bit of a too hard of a time over the last 6 years. I've always loved it, but it's always been kind of lower tier Zelda for me. But I really think that it has a chance to become my favorite on this current playthrough. I'm playing in pro mode, and I've banned fast travel. I'm not allowed to do fast travel.
Oh, wow.
I think where Breath of the Wild started to fall apart a little bit for me was in that kind of latter half of the game where you're just ping-ponging all around the map from shrine to shrine, tower to tower to do the next thing, and it kind of loses that sense of discovery and adventure that it really had in those first 30-ish hours. And so by banning fast travel, like I just did the two shrines on the Twin Peaks, the Dueling Peaks mountains, where there's you have to match the puzzle from the one on the right to the one on the left and vice versa. And I didn't just fast travel back to the other one after I had completed the puzzle with the other. I climbed back up that mountain, and it was a struggle, and it was kind of a little
glutton for punishment
I had, and it's cool. I'm having a great time with that. So yeah, and then I did all the side quests in Kakariko Village, which were fun, and yeah, I'm really enjoying it.
it does something that not a lot of video games I think do really well, which is it lets you replay it and have it be a different game. So I've been doing a hero mode replay as well, and the first time I played it, I did sort of what I would consider the standard path, right? You come off the plateau, you go past the Dueling Peaks, you go to Kakariko Village. I was like, no, I'm gonna go visit, I'm gonna go get Rivali's Gale. I'm gonna do all that stuff first. Basically, everything that I did, pardon me, in my initial playthrough, I'm doing the exact opposite in reverse order, and it's been a completely different experience. And so it's like I don't have like Mipha's Grace to easily heal me. I don't have like the Master Sword, so I'm having to like make do with whatever weapons I find. But like I'm also bypassing a lot of climbing because I have Rivali's Gale, so I can ascend rapidly, and I'm getting to places that I couldn't easily get to before. And it feels like a completely different game, even though I'm playing the exact same thing. And the ability to do that, the ability to say, okay, I'm going to play this, and I'm going to have a completely different experience intentionally. Not many.
How many games can you say that? Yeah, like back in the PS3 era, like they always talked about like games like Infamous, Star Fox Guard. Games like Infamous would be like you have the hero path and the evil path, and it's like really it's the same game. You're just being a jerk or you're not.
Do you want to play it in blue or red? Really is the question, right?
Or a lot of games have the thing where it's like you customize your character, you pick a class at the start, and then your class is different. So then kind of the actions you're doing throughout the same path are different. But there's not many times where you can take a different path with that same Link character. So yeah, it's cool. I love it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's the sort of thing where when I think about the game, I don't think about a lot of particular like set pieces or like story beats necessarily. Like there's a couple impactful things, but all I ever think about is like just the feeling of playing it and that just the moment to moment adventure. The way that I play it is like I go into a region and I live in the region. I experience everything there is to experience there. I get to know it like top to bottom, and I check everything out. I don't always find everything. You have to come back later, but it's unbelievably immersive, and the way that you can sort of like feel like you're living the life of people who live there because you see their schedules like of the day and night and the adventures that they go on. You get wrapped up into it's the sort of game that when we were, or at least when I was young, it was what I imagined was happening in the games that I was playing. Like when I played the original Legend of Zelda on the Super Nintendo, that's the headcanon I had for when I'm going like screen to screen. And the fact that it like realizes that to such an extent is unbelievable to me.
Absolutely. All right, enough's been said on and off this podcast about Breath of the Wild. I've also heard you're a big Mega Man X fan.
Yeah, and so we were talking about that. The one contender that pushes the Legend of Zelda for me is Mega Man X. I love the series in totality, but in particular the first two games. I'm working on a piece right now about it that should go up at the end of the month. Sort of a retrospective on the original. I play that game at least 3 times per year. I think that it has maybe the best soundtrack of all time in all video games. I think that the gameplay is sublime. Like I don't think there are many perfect games. I think the first Mega Man X is a perfect game. I can't think of a single thing about it I would change. The action is quick, it's tight, it's clean. You are very maneuverable. You have good firepower, but not perfect firepower. Enemy variety. Some things you need to attack aggressively. Some you need to stay away from. The bosses with a ton of personality. And the way that they did personality back then using, their colorful sprite work, using very simple animations to convey like basic ideas to establish character that way rather than like cutscenes and exposition and things like that. Some of it is like absolutely filled in by that childish headcanon, but it's also validated by, really deep instruction manuals with deep lore and backstory behind all these characters. I think that not only is Mega Man X one of the greatest games of all time, I think that it low-key has one of the best stories of all time, which actually is kind of what I'm writing about.
Very cool. And also, they just announced Minecraft DLC for Mega Man X this week, right? We hadn't heard about it prior to this week, which is crazy, and now you're here on the week this happens.
Yeah, it's serendipitous, and like I'm not a big Minecrafter. I dabble occasionally. I have some kids who get really into it, and like as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, here I go on mining. The integration is really cool too. Sometimes they do these crossovers, right? And they'll drop some skins into it. maybe an object or two. And Mega Man X in particular has cameoed in a lot of games before. Most notably, Dead Rising 3. You could get the X Buster and like an armor if you completed under a certain time and things like that. But what they're doing in this game is pretty deep. Like, not only do you have like, you can play as X or Zero, they've built Minecraft versions of several of the levels that you play through in either a first-person perspective or a 2D side-scrolling, and I haven't had a chance to get my hands on it yet, but it seems like you switch between the two. They've integrated several of the bosses from the game, an upgrade system between levels, and a final showdown in a multi-tiered final level section like in the Mega Man and Mega Man X games against Sigma. The amount of thought and care that went into this is astounding. And I mentioned the soundtrack. I think they have like 14 tracks from the game into it. I didn't even know that this thing existed, and I didn't know that this was like the thing that was missing from my life. And I'm thrilled that it exists, and I can't wait to dig in.
Very cool. Yeah, the Sonic Minecraft collaboration was very bad, so hopefully this one turns out better. Yeah. Justin, welcome to the Boardroom. I want to talk to Chris too, though. Don't want you feeling left out, Shriver. You've got some new plushies to show off, which I'm very excited and jealous of.
These are from the. For those listening, I ordered the Hobonichi Earthbound / Mother 2 plushies, featuring all of the main protagonists from Earthbound, Mother 2. Yeah, so these were sold a while ago. And they really haven't done a rerun of them. So they did another rerun on Valentine's Day. It was Valentine's Day in Japan, but it was actually, I think, when I wrapped maybe an episode of the Platformers. Like, I looked at Twitter and saw they were available. And yeah, I think the attention to detail is great. I love the you have all the little sprite work on the box. They show you all the different locations from the game. But if you're an Earthbound or a Mother fan, definitely look at that store. They do ship to the U.S. and they have like gone. All kinds of. Are they gone? No, not the plushies, but they have other stuff on there, like T-shirts and all that cool stuff. No, the plushies are sold out though. They are like wildly exclusive. If you look on eBay, they sell for like $400. It's a hot commodity.
I saw the day before they were going back in stock, and then I missed them by a couple minutes when it happened because I was busy. Yeah, but at least I can look at them on Chris's camera. That's pretty.
Behold, nice. I don't know if I'm going to take them out yet.
The next best thing.
Unbox them. Come on.
For now, they'll live in there until my 10 years from now when my basement's redone. After everything around me is redone.
Chris says that. We know tonight is going to be you with all four of them just in your arms while you're in bed. Happy as could be.
All right, well, that was our very long introductory segment. This week on the Toadstool Boardroom, we're a weekly Nintendo podcast, and this week we're asking for your help, because if you're watching The Last of Us, then you know that all fungi wants to grow, and we also want to grow here on the Toadstool Boardroom. That was my joke, Chris,
nice.
That I thought you would hate.
That was adorable. No, I thought you were going to do a Star Fox thing. I love that.
No.
I loved it very much.
Yeah, we want to grow. So if you like the show, please head on over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen. Leave us a rating. And here's a challenge for you. A challenge for you, dear listener. Tell one person you know about the Toadstool Boardroom. And let's see if we can get this spreading across the country. It's not as devastating as what spread in The Last of Us. We're a much better force for the world. So let's see if we can if you can help us out. That would really appreciate it. But let's get into our main topics for this week.
Logan.
Yeah.
We do have a new listener to the Toadstool Boardroom that sent in some. This is our listener mail. Do you want to wait, or do you want to shout them out now?
The run of show that I crafted for you, you'd see that it's low.
I did not, because I was getting my plushies out of the basement.
Priorities.
That's fine. We can wait.
Okay, we can skip ahead. We'll skip ahead. So last week we had an Amiibo show. We had my friend TJ on to talk all about customizing Amiibo. It was a lot of fun. And we asked you to send in your Amiibo memories. And a new listener, Cody, wrote into the show at Toadstool Boardroom at gmail.com. And Cody said, "The Amiibo episode was my first time catching the show. It was very engaging." Thank you, Cody. Also, we've had 2 Codys write in. So this is a new Cody. This is not our old friend Cody, who's also written in. "I just wanted to say the variety of figures was my favorite aspect of Amiibo. Villains, mob enemies, and third-party sponsored Nintendo figures were not things I expected to see when they announced it. Sincerely, Cody." Yeah, that's cool. We got, Diablo, Monster Hunter, Cereal Box. There's a bunch of really
Shovel Knight.
Shovel Knight? Oh, yeah, Shovel Knight.
Yeah.
I forgot those.
Shovel Knight ones took forever to come out.
Yep. Yeah. Justin, do you have any Amiibo?
No, so I specifically made a choice not to collect Amiibo. Honestly, I've tried to get away from too much stuff, right? So I tend not to buy a lot of physical media nowadays. I try and just have fewer things. That being said, and I'm not going to recommend this because this is let's call it ethically dubious. I did want to take advantage of a lot of the features, specifically for Breath of the Wild, actually. Yeah. So I may have a bunch of NFC tags that are tagged as Amiibo. Well, and I'm a filthy completionist. So the main reason I did it too is because there's a bunch of exclusive weapons tied to them that I wanted to take pictures of for my compendium. Because I'm a sicko, and so that's what I have. And they've got attractive little pictures on them, but I very intentionally didn't, because it's one of those things where it's like, I feel like you either have none or few, or you have to collect the whole set, right? Or you at least try and collect specific sets. Like, I need the Smash set, I need the set from this game, and I did not want to end up fist fighting somebody in a Walmart over Ness.
I'm gonna.
A lot of 8-year-olds got black eyes a couple years ago from this guy.
Right.
Oh wow.
Yep.
Okay.
Philly.
All right, let's talk about Pokemon. There is a Pokemon Presents event that will have happened by the time we record next week's show, so we'll be talking about all the announcements then. And it's scheduled for February 27th. It's going to air at 6 a.m. Pacific time. And it's going to run for 20 minutes. Last year at this event, Scarlet and Violet was announced. This is usually where they announce the new Pokemon game for the year. And also, kind of in the same vein, the latest update for Scarlet and Violet just dropped last week. And I need to read part of the patch notes for this, because I think to me, and I think Chris also will find this just absolutely insane. Yeah, this is a quote from the patch notes. "We will address an issue that can cause the game to forcibly close at certain locations. As a result of this fix, there may be a reduction of Pokemon and people displayed in certain towns or in the wild." So when the game crashes, there's just remove some assets from there, just get them out of there. And it's kind of how I'm feeling is everyone's like, "Oh, are they gonna announce the next Pokemon game next week?" And I don't know how I feel about them announcing their next game when the last one that they released is still in such a poor state. And I kind of think the Pokemon Company and Game Freak need to rethink this cadence of releasing a game every single year. So, Chris, I'll go your way first. What do you think? I'm
hoping to God that it's not a mainline or a remake, like a Let's Go Silver, Let's Go Gold type thing. I just want them to be better. I say wearing a Slow King hoodie.
Where's your Star Fox shirt, man? I thought you were going to wear that.
I know, I was going to, and then I was like, I've worn that hoodie on so many episodes of this show, and this is so fresh. I just got this. I love it. It's stitched in. Anyway.
Always keep them guessing.
Oh, yeah. It's got Pokeballs on the sleeve.
Nice.
It's great. Yeah, it's just a shame. And I don't want to, beat a dead horse with this, but I get them trying to get the game to a point where it is more stable. And I hope that this change will introduce that. We also we said a similar type of thing when the last set of changes were introduced into the patch notes. Whatever the last patch release was. But this seems like it's a quick and dirty and not a optimization. It's they took dev leads into a room and they're like, all right, what's the easiest way that we can get people to calm down? And it's well, maybe the world isn't as dense as it needs to be, or as it is right now, because of whether it's a memory issue or whatever. I'm not going to pretend like I know what's going on in the back end of Pokemon, because clearly they don't. It's just a shame. I don't want to, keep belaboring something that I've gone on and on and on about, but I think it will be. I don't know what's worse, if them not fixing Scarlet and Violet and then announcing a new game doesn't mean that less people will buy the next one, or the fact that they're not, like, they may not do it at all.
This is the fastest selling Nintendo game of all time, which is just absolutely bonkers to me. And I'll sprinkle a little positivity on this discussion. I finished Pokemon Scarlet a couple weeks ago, finally, after putting it down for about a month, and I did like the ending a lot. The end game is super cool. The last 3 hours is kind of bonkers. The story is like the craziest thing I think they've ever done in a mainline Pokemon game. Like, it's fun. It's a fun finale to this game. That being said, I stand by everything I said kind of on our review episodes of this thing, where I think that the open world design is fundamentally broken in terms of its leveling. I don't think Pokemon needs to be an overworld or an open world, and I think that the technical issues are just unacceptable. And it's like, I'm not ready to see the next game. And if you go back to what they did for Sword and Shield, the year after we saw DLC for it. They did 2 giant area expansions for it. So maybe it could be something like that we see instead. But I really think the best way that they can buy some goodwill for Pokemon following Scarlet and Violet is announce the GBA games for Switch Online and the Game Boy games. When those
that's 3DS, right.
People lost
That's
their
good call.
minds.
Yeah.
I think right now, we've been talking about it on the show a lot. GameCube, Game Boy Advance, that stuff's really in right now. Like Advance Wars, Metroid Prime, all this stuff. We've been talking about a lot. If you throw Ruby and Sapphire or Fire Red and Leaf Green on Switch Online, man, people would go bonkers for that. That would be, I think, the best thing that can come out of this.
So Game Explain has a video that they released like shortly after the Nintendo Direct, where they were looking at some of the trailers that Nintendo had released like across different regions, and one of them was Japan. And in that trailer that was showing off the Virtual Console, previously they would say, certain features are not available within these games, blah, blah, blah.
Interesting.
And that tagline was not there. And what they're speculating is that there's some sort of integration between a Game Boy game or GBA game, like whatever emulator that they've built into the Virtual Console, or I keep calling it that, but yeah, Switch Online. So that like if any Pokemon that you would raise within like Red or any of those GBA and GB games, you would be able to hook into Pokemon Stadium and Pokemon Stadium 2.
Very cool.
Yeah.
That's what you've been calling for like a year.
I've been saying it for a long time. Like it seems like a dead ringer, but like you also have to build an emulator that is able to do that on both ends, like sending and receiving.
Which they did do for the 3DS ports. They had wireless trading between Red.
They did.
Yeah. Justin, what do you think we're going to see in the presents?
Yeah, I mean, I'm cautious. I'm with you. I would hate to see this be another mainline Pokemon, because what it would tell me, and this is going to be a very mean thing to say, but what it would tell me is that they're sort of following the Madden path, right? If we can like link it to another game series where, you are a annual release, hell or high water, doesn't matter what state it's in, it ships every year. And if it's buggy and it's broken, there's some time to patch it, but you also hit a point, I feel like, where it's no longer viable or helpful to continue patching it. So you move on to the next game. And, Pokemon's not there yet, but you can see it, right? If every release is a little bit more suspect, iffy, you can see the cracks forming, but you still, no matter what, it's got to come out. It's got to come out. That puts us in that exact situation. And so I'm concerned about it. It's one of those things where it's like, don't tell me about the next course of the meal until you get like the one in front of me like cooked. Like, can we at least like agree on that? I find it telling that like the main fix of the patch is they just Thanos snapped like half of everybody away, and they're like, cool, all right, it's gonna run great now. Like, that seems like the sort of solution that either you should have known before you released it, or is you giving up on a more broad optimization, maybe at least temporary. So yeah, it is. It's concerning. I do think if the announcement is something a little bit more measured, a little bit more specific, like bringing up these GBA games like you selected, I think that would be a positive thing. People who like ports and emulation. and new game development, a lot of overlap, but they're not the same thing. And there's a lot of different aspects that go into creating a new game versus doing that, which tells me that, the people who work on the mainline stuff are, at least in theory, still working on the game that's out, and maybe in pre-production on the next thing. We can expect things to get better. If we're getting ports of something like Fire Red that we can play on like modern hardware and that has like great new features, I think that's fabulous. I looked into recently how much it would cost to buy a Fire Red cartridge, and so that's why I keep harping on that one. $200 if you want to play it today. Not to say nothing of whether the battery's been replaced and if you're going to be able to actually like save your games in there. And so making something like that accessible, I think, would be a huge win. So that's what I'm hoping for. I don't know if that's what I'm expecting, because I do think we're going to stay on an annual release cadence. Somewhat pessimistically, this is going to be an annual release, derogatory. But yeah, that would be my ideal, though, is bringing stuff, making it more accessible, and continuing a really good recent trend of excellent ports and upreses and things like that.
Yeah, I think that we're going to see. I think it'll be a DLC expansion. I remember there were. Basically, the Pokemon Company said when Sword and Shield came out, like, we're done with the third version. We're now doing this DLC strategy. And I think the game on shelves this year will be the super overpriced bundle of Scarlet Violet plus its DLC. Because, it didn't get a price reduction at all. It was like $90 for the physical copy of Sword with its DLC. But going back to what
every Nintendo game ever.
Yeah. It's like, I don't think they've released a complete game on Switch, like, issue free since Let's Go. Like, you look back to Sword and Shield had performance issues and was very content light in its story. The remakes of Diamond and Pearl were a buggy mess. There were so many issues in those games at launch. And then Legends Arceus had performance issues that then Scarlet.
We love it anyway. It's fine.
The best game in the world.
Snap was good. I had a good time with Pokemon Snap.
Yeah. I'm talking just Game Freak developed.
Yeah, exactly. But like that's it. It's like a port, or let's, like, in the case of like Let's Go, a semi port but kind of simplified, stripped down. I mean, they haven't made a like pillar Pokemon game that has come out of the gates looking very hot.
I mean, kind of on that, like, what other type of game would you want them to make at this point? Like, that has the Pokemon label on it.
I want another Mystery Dungeon on Switch. I think I loved the remake of that game.
Yeah,
that's a series that I grew up with. I was right in that age group when those games were coming out. I played them all. I loved them, and the remake was really, really good. But they remade the second best game in the series. The Explorers games were better than the Rescue Team games, and so I think if they remade those, that would be a nice surprise at the Pokemon Presents.
What if Detective Pikachu 2 comes?
Oh my!
I was going to say that. That was going to be my suggestion.
I feel like we haven't heard about that in like as much time as we didn't hear about the Metroid Prime remaster from like between those directs.
It was in the headlines like a month ago, and they're like, it still exists.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, they said that it still existed, and that was it. So that could totally be now.
Well, and it's also been about the right number of years since the movie came out, right?
Yeah.
For that to be far along.
Cool.
Just saying.
Lock it in.
I like that.
That's what's happening.
Yeah, Pokemon Sleep. I remember that. All right, we'll talk more about the
Boardroom guarantee.
Yeah.
The for Detective Pikachu 2.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll call Mystery Dungeon. There's been some rumors about that. I think it's real. And I'll say Scarlet Violet DLC. And I'll say they're not going to address the issues with Scarlet and Violet in this presentation.
Agreed.
Is lame. They should. But
agreed.
All right, let's move on. Other big story this week, and this one's really interesting to me. Microsoft signs a 10-year deal officially to bring Call of Duty to Nintendo. And this is on the contingent of if the Microsoft Activision Blizzard acquisition goes through, Microsoft's locked into what Vice President of Microsoft Brad Smith is calling a binding 10-year contract to bring Xbox games to Nintendo's gamers. Here is part of the statement. Microsoft and Nintendo have now negotiated and signed a binding 10-year legal agreement to bring Call of Duty to Nintendo players the same day as Xbox, with full feature and content parity, so they can experience Call of Duty just as Xbox and PlayStation gamers enjoy Call of Duty. So that is, man, that's insane. There hasn't been a Call of Duty game on a Nintendo platform in a decade. Call of Duty Ghosts on Wii U was the last time that we saw Call of Duty, and I can't even imagine how few copies of that were sold. It has to be like in the thousands. So Call of Duty's coming back, and this is an interesting story because this is something that if you host a PlayStation or an Xbox or a Nintendo podcast, this is relevant to you this week. But I almost think it's most interesting from the Nintendo perspective, because from the Xbox perspective, they're doing everything they can to push this merger through. And they're like, hey, look, we're going to bring Call of Duty everywhere. Nintendo's on board. For PlayStation's perspective, it's like now the pressure's on them to get on this deal, and what are they going to do about it? But for Nintendo, I've been thinking about it this week, and I can't decide how big a deal it is to have Call of Duty back on Nintendo. Because part of me is like, this is the best-selling game every year, and then part of me is like, but people aren't going to play it here. So, Justin, what do you think of Call of Duty on Nintendo?
Yeah, it's funny. The whole scenario is like mom and dad are fighting, so they keep buying you gifts, and that's kind of the position Nintendo is in, right?
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. So, truthfully, I mean, access to games is good. Like that's full stop something that I believe. I think access to Call of Duty for Nintendo gamers is a good thing. That being said, the Call of Duties that we've seen previously have often been either low quality ports, largely influenced by hardware, or we had a lot of like Wii specific like motion control versions, which frankly were not great. I think
flamethrower with the zapper.
It's true. You get the little plastic peripheral. I mean, well, I remember the commercials. Dudes like ducking behind the couch, so I could see what you're doing. Yeah. So like, it's kind of a catch-22. I think it's good. I think it's a good thing. I think Call of Duty coming to Nintendo platforms is a good thing. Frankly, if Microsoft is treating Activision like a subdivision that's there to make money, right? More so than a group of studios that are there to make software. And what better way to make money than to sell your software on 111 million Switches, right? So it's a good decision for them, but it really is from a Nintendo's perspective. I think going to largely matter on the quality of what they get. Can you make things that are properly optimized for the Switch? Do you have folks who know the hardware well enough to make it run well? We know some folks can get a lot out of it, but a lot of people can't. And so far, we just haven't had a chance to see that Activision and their studios are people who can. They talk about like feature parity and things like that. So does that mean that we are just talking ports? Or are they going to be purpose built for the machine? So there's a lot that we don't know. But just from a Nintendo perspective, there's no downside to popular video games being at least available on your platform. And for Nintendo gamers, even if you don't like Call of Duty and that's not your thing, that's fine. Don't play them. Go play Splatoon. But know that this is an opportunity to introduce more people into the Nintendo ecosystem, which again, rising tides lift all ships.
Yeah, it's interesting because you kept talking about the Switch. I don't know if these are going to be on Switch, because by the time this acquisition goes through and the annual release cadence,
that's the big question, right?
Yeah, It's over for Call of Duty. They're not going to pump one out every year. They've said that. That's what Phil Spencer said if this goes through. So it's like, are we looking towards the next platform? Does Xbox know anything about Nintendo's next platform that makes them confident they can say, yeah, we'll bring a feature content parody game to Nintendo? Like, do they know that Nintendo's going to have hardware to support that? I'm not saying this is going to happen. I don't think it is. But what if Nintendo's follow-up console is a Wii U again, and it sells 10 million units, and Microsoft's in this 10-year contract to keep pumping out Call of Duty on it? Like, there's just a lot of interesting ways this can go.
Yeah, the only thing that I'll add to that, besides the fact that Microsoft has infinite money, so that would be fine, is the fact that I think we can also expect that whatever the successor to the Switch is still going to be a much lower spec device versus its contemporaries. And so even if, a Switch Pro or a new console drops, we're probably not looking at something that's going to have the horsepower of a PS5 or an Xbox Series X or whatever the pro versions of those that come out. So even with that in mind, I think that still leaves us, wondering what quality of addition that we'll have on that. Nintendo and Microsoft have a history of a really good working relationship for a lot of years, so I believe in them to work these things out. And for a franchise as big as Call of Duty, it wouldn't be completely shocking to see them at least kind of tilt some spec towards making that possible if they're in that production stage. But no, that's a fabulous point about new hardware, though.
What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, it's either. It was like you look at the Overwatch port that they did on the Switch, and like nobody is really happy about it, but like it does exist. Like it is a feature to feature, port of that game. And same with Overwatch 2. You can say the same about Apex Legends from EA. But like there aren't many. I feel like the people that are playing that are the people that don't have it to play on any other platforms. It's like, well, I have a Switch and this is my only choice. It's not that it's your first choice. So I feel like there's one of two ways. Well, one of three ways they go about it. It's either it's not necessarily Game Pass, but there's like some sort of cloud version available because we've seen them do that with Square Enix and Capcom and a couple other third parties. There's a super like, all right, turn the scales way down port on the Switch, or we get one that is with the Steam Deck. It makes it interesting because like Call of Duty's looking at that thing and going, I wonder if we can, or Activision is looking at that thing and going, can we get this to run within a Linux environment and everything like that. And really parity wise, it's not too different. I mean, you're going Android to Linux. But if they're looking at the Steam Deck, then those conversations have to be happening of like, all right, just how powerful, what are the specs of this thing going to be? Just how powerful is it going to be? And if you do get a native port, like, is it up to snuff? Time will tell, but that feature parity part, the fact that they mentioned that is like the key thing. Because originally when I heard about it, I was like, oh, they're just going to port like Call of Duty 2.
I think COD Mobile.
The Switch.
Like,
COD Mobile was the other one. Yeah. If it's just that Android port, then like, all right, sure, it's there, but it's like porting PUBG or any of the other ones. Like, who really cares?
Yeah, it's interesting because I always thought it was just going to be like, oh, Warzone's on Switch. And that makes sense. Another thing we could bring up here that hasn't been mentioned yet, cloud versions. It could easily be cloud versions for 10 years.
Honestly, I think just from a Nintendo perspective and probably Microsoft perspective too, like if this did lead to just a cloud client that lets you access Game Pass titles on your Switch device, and
that would be something.
I don't think it will.
But so you start paying Microsoft your $15 a month or whatever, but you can play it on that device. So, like, Microsoft has been upfront, like they don't care about selling hardware. They've never been a hardware company. They're a they're Microsoft, not micro hard, right? If that be right, thanks. I've been workshopping that one. If they, if that is something that like does potentially come like down the pike because they have this relationship, and because frankly, Microsoft, in terms of like cloud gaming, they have much better infrastructure than what Nintendo's been using for games in the past. So it could be a good end user experience even on the existing Switch hardware if they get their ducks in a row. So yeah, I mean that's a kind of a Trojan horse for booting up to an Xbox logo on your Switch sometimes, for people who want to.
The only reason I don't see that happening is you have games that are available, and it's mostly in the indie space, which like I think Switch kind of thrives on a little bit. Like Nintendo loses out on those sales at that point.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I mean, there could get messy if there's a game that's available for Switch but also on Game Pass.
Yeah,
and
that's what I mean.
Consideration to things like that. Yeah, no, for sure. There are other boardrooms, believe it or not, that these conversations could probably happen in.
We were the only one.
Yeah, the only boardroom.
Yeah. Or there's different games on PC Game Pass than on Xbox Game Pass. So maybe there's a Switch Game Pass that has Game Pass in there.
I could totally see them doing that. Yeah,
because part of this statement and part of the GeForce Now, they made a deal basically the same day that they're going to bring Xbox games to GeForce Now. Is that it's not just Call of Duty, it's to bring Xbox games to Nintendo Switch. That was one of the first things here, to bring Xbox games. So it's not just Call of Duty. And I think that Call of Duty is obviously the centerpiece of this conversation because it's what Microsoft is pushing hard, because that's kind of the main IP that I think is keeping regulators from just giving the stamp of approval on this deal. But I don't know. Xbox games, like, we could see other stuff that's more appealing to a Nintendo audience find its way on Switch, and there's already some of that, like Minecraft Legends, Minecraft Dungeons, Minecraft itself. Those are all Xbox games that are on Switch. Banjo-Kazooie, as Justin's pointing out right now, is on Switch Online. Yeah, let's get Nuts and Bolts on Nintendo Switch. Yeah.
Why? You're getting Nuts and Bolts in May.
That's true.
Damn it, Chris! You beat me to it. I quit.
Right. That's our Xbox Call of Duty Nintendo discussion. It's interesting. I will say, I think there's games in development for the next hardware right now. I think that there's got to be some devs that know what's going on with Nintendo's next hardware. Because if you think about, like, we heard Dragon Quest XI, Project Sonic 2017, which turned into Sonic Forces. All these things had like NX logos at the time. So I think that's starting to ramp up now, where Nintendo's probably telling its closest trusted development partners what's going on in their next hardware. But that's for another time. For now, we're going to talk some quick news PSAs before we get into Star Fox. Splatoon 3 Expansion Pass Wave 1 is here on February 28th, so it'll be out the next time that we record. And this is Wave 1 of the expansion that lets players return to Splatoon 1's Inkopolis. That's the hub world from Splatoon 1. I'm laughing because Chris and I talked about that on a former episode, and he did not really get what that was. And it costs $24.99 for the expansion pass. And you cannot buy Wave 1 separately. If you buy any of it, you're in for all of it. So, yeah, interesting. Interesting strategy on this DLC. And then Zelda Tears of the Kingdom art book has leaked. Be careful out there. I've muted every word I can imaginable on Twitter, including link. So I'm seeing like tweets that is like, oh, this includes a word you muted. And I'm like, that has nothing to do with Zelda. I click and it's like, link here. I'm like, oh my gosh. The word, I didn't even think about that when I muted that word. But we're not talking about any spoilers here. Yeah, I know enough about Zelda, which actually made me wondering. I see a lot of people and some other podcasts I listen to saying basically like, oh, wow, they haven't shown enough about Zelda. We don't know what this game is. And they're kind of phrasing it in a negative way, where to me, it's a positive way, because I'm like, I'm thrilled. I don't know what it is. So, Chris, what do you think? Do you want to know more, or are you happy?
I'm happy with where we're at, but I've become this way like as time has gone on, where especially like since I left IGN, being able to have just enough to pique my interest and know as little as possible is like the perfect sweet spot that I want to be with most things at this point. It's way more enjoyable to be genuinely surprised by something when I'm playing or watching it than it is to like know everything going into it. And it's like, oh, okay, this is when this is going to happen. Like it just takes some of the fun out of it, or I'm expecting something. Whereas with this, it's like, I feel like we've seen enough new features and tool sets and locales, but there are still enough questions in the air to keep everything, exciting when it happens.
Yeah, what do you think, Justin?
Yeah, I agree. I think people are quick to forget what the Breath of the Wild lead up was like, but it was a lot of similar conversations. Like, we had a very, very short initial teaser where like there was debate whether or not that was even Link in like the trailer. Like that's how like tight everything was. And then radio silence for like years at a time. And it was a very similar slow trickle of information. Every time any trailer dropped, we dissected it. And I will say Tears of the Kingdom feels like it's been in development for approximately 1,000 years. So I can understand a certain level of fatigue. But this is how they approached it before, and it was perfect. We ended up surprised and delighted by what it was. Even when we finally got our hands on it, we didn't entirely know what we were going to experience going in. I think there's maybe a little bit of... There was the period where we received the final launch trailer, and the launch itself, right? That little window where we learned a lot more about the game from that. And frankly, it was because the launch trailer was maybe the greatest trailer of all time. It was like 5 minutes long. It like hit all sorts of different beats, amazing swell of music, and we got to hear like Zelda's voice for the first time. And so it was like, it did a really good job giving everybody a taste of every little thing that they've been like waiting for, but without giving stuff away. I don't know if it's going to be as good, but I have to believe that they're going to hit us with the same thing when we get really close to launch. That last little bit where it's like, yes, here's everything you're asking for. We're not going to give it to you, but we are going to give you just as much to make you crave it more. And then you can sit and wait. Now, this is the playbook, and they're executing it to perfection.
Yeah, I think we're going to get a Zelda Direct. I do. We got a Xenoblade 3 Direct, and we got a Splatoon 3 Direct. I think that this game is that big that they're going to give it one, and they're going to show some gameplay for the first time. We haven't seen what this game plays like. We know what it plays like.
And I think, don't quote me on this, especially because hopefully it's not covered by an NDA somewhere. I think we're expecting a Nintendo presence at PAX East. And we don't know exactly what that is. Like, we don't know specifically what they're going to be advertising. At PAX West, it was a big Bayonetta presence. Here, the most logical thing is Nintendo. I've worked with Nintendo. I work in the live events industry, so I've worked with Nintendo directly on like live events before in the past. And usually, like, there's a lot of big set build and a lot of pieces they build. I remember when they launched their remake of the Game Boy Zelda.
Link's Awakening.
Link's Awakening. I was saying the Windfish, but that's not it. Like they had a whole diorama built and a lot of really cool features and things like that. Things that take time, could slip, and so I would not be shocked if we saw a very large presence at PAX East about it. Now, don't let that be your decision maker to go buy tickets. I don't know specifically what it's going to be, but it's about the right time frame. I do think there is still a large promotional push that's going to happen, but it's still going to be something that is very contained and doesn't give everything away. And we're frankly a month out from it, just from a timeline standpoint.
I think that everyone at PAX East will have a great time getting their hands on Bayonetta Origins. That's what I think. I think that people will have a blast playing that. But yeah, I don't know. Every trailer we've seen, I walk away with more questions than answers, and that's what I want for me personally.
That's it.
As a Zelda super fan, who knows who I'm gonna sink hours into this game and love it. And I mean, if you need like a resume, just look at Breath of the Wild. Like, that game's amazing, and we're getting a sequel to it. Like, I don't know. And even God of War Ragnarok, there were a lot of questions, and then like a month before, they were like state of play about it.
Yep.
And then there it was. So, yep. I don't want to see any more, and I don't really want to talk about anything new that comes out because I probably won't watch it. So if we don't talk about new Zelda trailers here, that's why, but we'll see. I'm undecided. And then last bit of quick news, there's going to be a Mario movie direct on March 9th with the final trailer and nothing else. So look forward to that. It's going to be Mario Day, March 10th. Eye roll in Japan, the day that trailer drops.
I mean, eye roll.
It's so silly, man.
It's so cute.
It's such a contrived holiday.
Like, to have Mario's birthday, like, the day Mario came out. But I guess no one knows the day that Mario came out.
It's not really a day. It's like a week or two.
Like a month-long period. Some stores had it, some didn't. Yeah.
This is when it showed up.
Wake me up on Luigi Day.
Luigi. It's the 10-year anniversary of the year Luigi. We're doing a show about it at some point, by the way.
Yes, I am super in.
I'm one of the only ones that remembers the year Luigi. 10-year anniversary. Let's talk about a 30-year anniversary, though. This is for Star Fox. 30 years ago, the original came out on the Super Famicom in Japan. That's February 21st, 1993. It spawned a number of sequels. Star Fox 64, Star Fox Adventures on the GameCube, Star Fox Assault on the GameCube, Command on the DS, Star Fox 64, 3D on the 3DS, Star Fox Zero and Guard came out together on the Wii U in 2016, and Star Fox 2, the canceled SNES game, made its way to existence on the Super Nintendo Classic in 2017, and he's got a large presence in Smash Brothers, and there's a Nintendo Land. Is there a Nintendo Land Star Fox game?
No.
I don't know if there is.
I don't think so.
Was Metroid
I don't
and
think
F-Zero?
there is.
Man, what's up with that? Anyways, but we're here to talk about Star Fox's 30th anniversary. I'll start. I don't have much love for this franchise. I know you guys enjoy it a lot more than I do. I've played Star Fox 1, I've played Star Fox 64, 64 3D, and Zero, and it's just never personally clicked with me. I get the appeal of the originals and how groundbreaking and cool they were at the time, but something we're going to talk about later on in this discussion is I think that they just started spinning their wheels a little bit and doing the same thing over and over that they started in Star Fox, perfected in 64, and then I think it's all been kind of downhill from there. So we'll talk about that more later, but I'll throw it over to you guys. Justin, what do you love about Star Fox?
I love a lot about Star Fox, honestly. So I was exactly the right age when Star Fox came out for it to be a very, very big deal. I distinctly remember, we were just talking about a marketing push. There was an enormous marketing push for Star Fox. Everything from like the characters in commercials to promoting the Super FX chip as this revolutionary new chip to get 3D polygons, which was actually accurate. I remember you could it being on the back of cereal boxes. I remember you could get one of those like LCD video games of Star Fox Auto Watch out of a cereal box. Like, it was, the promotional push was enormous, and this was one of those cases where it nailed it. Like, we hadn't seen anything like this, which offered, even though it was an on-rail shooters, a lot of freedom of movement in a 3D space. And it didn't use the Mode 7 graphics like we would use in like a lot of Mario Kart or when you're in the overworld, the Secret of Mana and things like that. No, like, it really felt like you were flying through these environments, and it had really cool imaginative enemies. Sometimes they were ships, sometimes they were creatures, and it felt fast, especially as you move like horizontally, doing things like barrel rolls and like picking up power-ups and things like that. The original Star Fox today is an amazingly playable and very fun game with an incredible soundtrack, especially the opening track on Corneria, where you start the game. It was one of those games where, like, as a kid, everybody would also like get on the playground. You would spread rumors. Oh, like, you can get into the black hole. No, you can't. Well, actually, you can, and I learned about that because I read it on the back of a cereal box. And it was honestly revolutionary. It was a unusual case where Nintendo worked primarily with Western programmers to create the tech behind it. And the Super FX chip is an actual chip that they originally tried to see if could be integrated into the Super Nintendo itself, but then opted to actually make it part of the cartridge. And so when you see that little logo on a cartridge for that, or F-Zero, which also had the chip, that wasn't just like marketing speak. There literally was an additional chip to unlock additional ability and power in the console.
So how much more expensive did that make the cart at the time to buy? Was it more?
I don't recall it being more expensive. I didn't have a lot of money as a kid. My mom bought it for me, so
yeah,
I'm gonna go with it. It was probably fine. But as a result, we ended up with a game that like nothing else could do, and the fact that they followed up with a sequel on the Nintendo 64 that like Zelda before it and like Mario before it, somehow navigated that jump to like full 3D environments, including levels where you were like disconnected, fully free in 3D. Mind blowing. It's an amazing franchise, and it's had a lot of missteps since then, but it's I think one of like the tentpole franchises, and one of the things that when I say that the Super Nintendo is my favorite console of all time, Star Fox is one of the reasons why.
Yeah, one thing also that I do really love about Star Fox is that I think it's very cool that the design of the characters and the ships still today was informed by the technical limitations of the Super Nintendo and that chip. Like, just these very angular, polygonal, the R-Wing, like, it still today looks like it belongs in the SNES N64 era. And that's something that I think is very, very cool. I think that's something we've lost a little bit as we get further along into advanced technology and things like that with game development. It's like, man, a lot of the things that you love about like classic games are because of like limitations. Like Mario's mustache is because they wanted his face to be visible, and Link is left-handed because it was easier for them to develop that way. And it's like there's just these crazy stories like that, and Star Fox is one of them where like I think the R-Wing design is just classic, and it's because it originated then when it had to look like that. I think it's
I'm a big believer in the idea that confines create creativity, that being presented with a problem and having to find a solution is good for the creative process, and that's a great example of it. And like it seriously could have just been a tech demo. Eventually you get through the game, and like spoilers for 1993, but you face off against the boss, which is this giant head that spits these rotating tiles at you that are like scaling to size. If you die and end up on the continue screen, there's a model of the R-Wing that you can spin and look at it fully 3D. You can zoom in, zoom out. It would do this thing where you could copy itself infinitely, make patterns out of it. Incredible technology. It was mind-blowing at the time, and it is like, I remember literally like having friends over and just playing on the continue screen. Like we'd play to get to the continue screen so we could just like screw around with a model.
Chris, what are some of your memories of Star Fox?
So one of the earlier questions was, what did it sell for at launch? It was $59.99 at Electronics Boutique per an ad that I just found on the internet.
And you don't think Tears of the Kingdom was worth $70, you people? Come on.
Yeah, this is in 1993.
$60.
Yeah. So the original Star Fox I actually didn't play until I was in college. When my wife and I started dating, she got me a Retron 5, and it was like the first kind of like console other than a Super Nintendo that I could play Super Nintendo games on, like just a clone console. Which now that console became very controversial, but we didn't know that at the time. But I remember, like, I always appreciate very old technology and where technology kind of comes from, and like the development story behind the original Star Fox and the way that they made it. Always really, like, I always had like a respect for it in that way. And it's like, this is the showcase for this new chip for the Super Nintendo. If you're at all interested in anything like that, there's a Netflix documentary called High Score, where they go through the development process of Super Nintendo Star Fox. You should definitely check it out. And then there's also a new ROM hack that is out that is like will blow your mind if you are into that kind of thing, called Star Fox EX. And basically what it is like a fan director's cut that supports supports 4-player multiplayer. You can select different ship models and things like that. Like they've taken everything that they can out of the Super FX chip and just squeezed everything out of it. Added new levels. You can fight like and change the character models. So like you fight like a giant Mario and a giant Luigi. Like it's just really, really cool stuff.
Cool.
But as far as like my love of Star Fox in general, like I think it's the perfect playground game. It's the perfect game. It was the perfect game at an age where like the internet wasn't really that big. Where you would talk to other people and be like, oh, well, I got to like, I see all these other planets on this map. I don't understand how I'm supposed to get there. And I keep playing this game over and over again. And the same can be said about 64. And when you start to chip away at those layers, and because the game is so replayable, it really does like, it just becomes addictive. And some of the missions are pretty hard, especially for younger players. Like now I can breeze through 64 no problem, but when I was growing up, it was a feat if you got to Andros. Like that was a big deal. Like you had a good day that day. Yeah, I mean 64 was like the main one. I don't know how I remember as much of it as I do, but like I was 3.5, 4 years old when that game came out. And I remember the day my brother got it. It came in this giant box, the Rumble Pack. We never had a Rumble Pack before, like in a video game console. It was always a representation of like Nintendo saying, for at least in the early days, it was this like, we're going to try this new crazy thing and see how we can implement it. And make a new experience for you. Like it was always kind of treated like this flagship title in that way. So I think for me, that's why I've always like, even say what you will about Star Fox Zero, but like it is a very unique case of like we built this entire game around the Wii U gamepad. Mm-hmm. If you have the Steam Deck, I highly recommend, and you own a legal copy of Star Fox Zero, download Cemu and play it on the Steam Deck. It's probably the best way to play that game. I will stand by that till the day I die. Yeah, I mean, it's a shame that
I'd say co-op's actually the best way to play Star Fox Zero. I think co-op in that game is actually pretty fun. With one
I never
person
got to play
controlling the
a
gun
co-op
and one person flying the ship. It's a cool way.
Yeah. I mean, that game has problems, but like, it's pretty good on Steam Deck. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's just it's such a comfort food game for me. Something that is so easy to revisit, and you can see the entire thing all the way through, like in that experience.
The fact that you could experience the entire thing in one sitting, I think, is additive to it. Really.
Yeah,
I think that. Yeah, it's interesting because I opened this up by saying I'm not big on Star Fox. I respect the series a lot. I think it's cool, and I wanted to touch on something Chris brought up. I was thinking this before. Is I think that Star Fox is so cool for people that did grow up with it when it was new and coming out, and 64 as well. Because, like you said, in age before the internet was what it was now, and you had to discover these secrets for yourself and talk to your friends about these secrets, like. The one that comes to mind is like the first level in 64. If you fight the bogies that are attacking Falco and then fly underneath all the arches, right? Then that branches you off to the other path. And it's like, I didn't have the experience of how cool that was to just discover because I'd listened to a podcast where they said it. Like I just did to you. Sorry, everyone. Or you'd see it on Twitter or you'd see it on a guide. And it's like, when you strip that discovery away, it's like, just replaying this 2-hour game a different way with a guide pulled up, and it's like it's just not
the same. I remember my cousin doing that for the first time, and none of us had seen it before, and like we had never seen that boss fight before. Mm-hmm. We were down the shore at my uncle's shore house, and like we all lost our minds. Like, what do you mean this is how you do it? You know, it was really exciting.
Yeah, and it's a different type of game, too, because, like, Zelda on NES has all these secrets, like, oh, bomb this wall to do this. But with the on-rails nature of Star Fox, it's like, oh, if you don't get it, you missed it. Like, you have to do it again. You have to start over to go and play this song the right way, basically, to unlock this different thing. And I do think that's a really cool aspect of it. But there's just a lot about Star Fox to me that just kind of makes it a product of its time. And we talk about 64. I agree, 64 is great. The 3DS remake is awesome. I really like that game. But I just don't think that the franchise will ever... I think it's peaked. I don't think there will ever be a Star Fox game that you guys say, yep, this is better than 64. I just don't think it's going to happen, because I think that Zero, when it came out, the entire conversation was, $60 for a 4-hour game and all this stuff. And I think that in today's day and age, that's always going to be the discussion around Star Fox, if they even ever do revisit it at all. It's like, well, how do you do it in the modern context where the internet exists, the way to discover these secrets is not talking on the playground like it used to be, and people expect more length out of their full price games? I just don't know how you do it. I don't know how to bring Star Fox back.
I think a lot of the problem with the Star Fox franchise since then, and I think it frankly hasn't been great since then, is that they've sort of lost the identity of what Star Fox is and why people liked it in the first place. You know, it as much as like we have like Fox and Falco in like Smash and stuff, it's not really about their story. Like he's not a tentpole mascot, even though he's like a cool looking character. It's about the action and the tech and what it does. What a future Star Fox should got my Starbucks right here. What a future Star Fox like really should be doing is trying to recapture that. Like if you can release something that is similar to what we're seeing with like the Metroid port, like a unusually beautiful game, a technically impressive game, something that stands out for the quality of its tech, that also, leans into, speed and leads into, the freedom of flight, and is full of moments that create those stories, right? Not something with very bespoke levels where you get from point A to point B, which is largely what Star Fox became after that. But something where, you want to experience it again and again, and similar to our conversations earlier about Breath of the Wild, where like you want to try it a different way and see if you can approach it in another way and see what happens. Give me a beautiful looking space shooter where I don't turn into a chicken robot and I don't beat up people with a bow staff, and make it something that is incredible to look at, plays really well, and gives me a reason to come back to it over and over and over again. And I think you have a winning formula that will work in 2023.
I feel like there were things that were introduced within Starlink, which, like, if for those that don't remember, there was a Ubisoft game in the early in the Switch's life cycle called Starlink that it had like its own Star Fox missions and campaign. You could play the whole game as Fox McCloud. And there were certain mechanics within that game that I think would work really well within a Star Fox game. Like traversing, that game did the No Man's Sky thing, I think, better than No Man's Sky, and I don't think it ever got credit for it, where you would land on a planet, but you were legitimately like landing on a planet. And then you would like traverse that planet as like a different type of vehicle. But it had like the chicken problem where you're going around and you're flying around like in this like horizontal kind of cockpit, almost like the Arkham games, like the tank.
I don't want to drive a tank in Star Fox.
No, I want to fly a.
Exactly, like that. That's what I want, and I think like Starlink is a great example, because like it was like a Toys to Life game, but if you had the R-Wing toy, you got to fly an R-Wing, and all of a sudden it's Star Fox and it's rad, right? Yeah. I think that, like, honestly, if that game were built like ground up just as a Star Fox game with no additional peripherals or things like that, I think there's a chance that it would have resonated with people, and I think if anything, it's proof that there is something still there.
Yeah, I'd like to see it come back. I mean, I'd like to see. I never want to see a Nintendo franchise go dormant. Like, I just never want that. I'm sitting here waiting for F-Zero to come back, which absolutely needs to happen. I got Metroid Prime Remastered today, and I'm like, oh my god, if they made a $40 HD remaster of GX, it would be the greatest day of my life. Like, I think about that. Metroid's really making me think about that. But Star Fox also, I think that I'd like to see them take another crack where there's just not some weird gimmick attached. Like, we all know Adventures basically isn't Star Fox. It started life as something else and was repurposed. And then Assault, it had all the on-foot stuff that I think people were really did.
The controls in that game are really bad, but I don't think that that's Assault's fault. I think it's like a lot of twin stick stuff on the GameCube really, really suffered. And that game is like a prime example of like how twin stick was not figured out at that point.
And then Command had like you trace your path on the DS, and I don't know.
Command was like an RTS type.
Yeah, it's been nothing but gimmicks for 20 years
20
now.
Years?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd like to see it come back in some sort of capacity that, and I don't know, because it's like, you want to please a bunch of new fans, but I don't know how you do that, because I think Star Fox is an arcadey on-rail shooter. And I'll stand by that Kid Icarus Uprising's on-rail levels are better than anything Star Fox has ever done. So maybe they could look there for some inspiration. But
the only thing that I want to point out is Star Fox is also one of the coolest secret Easter eggs in The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. There's an R-wing in that game.
Yeah, that's cool. Look up that video if you haven't. It's super cool. It's like it's in there because they were like using it as a proof of concept of the Z targeting.
We need something to Z target and track. What do we got? I got this R-wing. Yeah, shove it in.
Yeah, that's super cool.
There's real quick. There are 2 games to look out for. One of them is only on PC right now, and it's still in early access. It's called X Zodiac. If you're a fan of Star Fox, like traditional Star Fox games, like where you're in the R-wing, level by level, I highly recommend it. It's I think there's like 6 or 7 levels, and then each one is like a bonus level that's similar to, I want to say like Legend of Dragoon, but I don't think that's right. It's like a Neo Geo game. Anyway, that game is excellent. I replay that like pretty consistently. And then Nintendo Life actually wrote an article on a game that is coming out on March 17th. It's called Fur Squadron, which is like,
sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's like unapologetically like a Star Fox clone. But it looks like old school Star Fox with a like retro wave type of vibe. It's cool. Being listed at €6.29, whatever that is. €6, £6, whatever.
Okay.
So it's going to be like $7 or $8 in the US whenever it comes out.
Cool. Yeah. All right. That was our journey through the Lylat system, Star Fox. Send in your Star Fox thoughts. Toadstoolboardroom@gmail.com. And that is our show. I want to tease ahead to next week, though, because we've got an exciting show next week. We're going to be talking about Metroid Prime Remastered, which I finally got. Physical version. It's very nice. It has the alternate cover of the Japanese cover in there. I have Metroid Dread in there right now because I don't organize my games as well as I should. I know. I'm getting a Kirby this weekend. Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe is out on Friday, and I'm going to be playing through that multiplayer. I'll have some impressions on that. Chris is headed to the Nintendo New York store, and he's going to be talking about that. What you looking for, Chris?
Baby stuff. Anything I can buy for my upcoming child. They have the Lil Logan, the best pair of sweatpants I have ever owned in my life, and my wife has ever owned in my life, and she was a college athlete, so like if she's saying it, it's true. So we're gonna buy fresh new sweatpants because the ones that we got like 8 or 9 years ago, and I know they still sell them because I have a friend that lives in New York, and she borrowed my wife's pair and was like, I have to get these, and we told him where to get them. She couldn't believe it.
Awesome.
So yeah, I'm gonna get new sweatpants. Any Metroid like merch. I drop a $1 or $2 in the Nintendo store whenever I visit. But every time I go, like they rotate things out enough that it keeps it interesting. Probably not any plushies. I think I'm past that point.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, probably not any plushies, but definitely some shirts, and if they have any of those like World of Nintendo figures, I would love to get some of those. And then of course, if there's any F-Zero stuff, I don't expect there to be, but if there is,
thanks, man. Be on the lookout. I'm obsessed these days. And
Justin, if there's anything that you're interested in.
You know what? I've had my eye out. They do it on Amazon occasionally. Those little like about that big Metroids.
Yeah.
If you snag me one of those, man.
Oh, I'll be on the lookout for sure.
And I have a question for the audience that I want them to answer on Twitter at ToadstoolBR, or email toadstoolboardroom@gmail.com. And I was thinking about this because of Metroid Prime. We're going to have a big talk about Metroid Prime. I started it. I was almost late getting ready for the show because I could not stop playing it. It controls like a dream. It's everything I wanted. Justin, I've never finished the original because I just hate how it controls. I just can't stand it. So I'm loving it.
He's a baby.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Product of your time. Not your fault.
Yeah.
Then I was thinking that with Metroid Prime, like the big three classic Nintendo series, that's Mario, Zelda, Metroid, now I'll have a 2D entry and a 3D entry on Switch. So I want to ask you guys, you have a week to think about it. Which of them has the best 3D, 2D, 1-2 punch available on Switch? Not 1-2 Switch, 1-2 punch. So here are the choices. Metroid's got Metroid Prime Remastered, Metroid Dread. Great set of games right there. There's a couple options for Mario. For 3D, I went with Odyssey. It's the best one. I love 3D World and Bowser's Fury, but Odyssey is better. And then between Maker and U Deluxe, I went with U Deluxe just because it's the classic 2D Mario. It's Maker. I don't know. It's not really mainline in my opinion. Chris is making a face at me. I couldn't decide. If you want to use Maker, use Maker. It's your choice. And then for Zelda, obviously we've got Link's Awakening and Skyward Sword HD. I'm kidding. Breath of the Wild.
I was like, is he?
No.
Is he serious?
No, I thought I'd get you with that, Chris. But yeah, I thought it was an interesting question. Like, we now have 2D, 3D of all these series. They all do it in very different ways. Like, I was kind of thinking about Zelda is like Link's Awakening and Breath of the Wild are very different games. Like, Link's Awakening is classic, linear, dungeon-based Zelda, and then Breath of the Wild, we talked about a lot on the show about what it is. And then Mario U Deluxe is platformer, get to the goal, linear, and then Odyssey is these open area collectathon. But then Metroid's a little bit similar. I don't know, Dread is like badass Samus, and then Prime feels like Detective Samus, which is super cool. Like, they are different in that way, but they're still kind of at the end of the day like 10 to 15 hour Metroidvanias. So yeah, take your pick. What's the best 1-2 punch of 2D, 3D Mario, Zelda, Metroid? And we'll talk about it next week on the show.
It's like choosing my favorite child.
I know, it's a good question.
Yeah.
I was proud of myself when I came up with that. But that's another episode of the Toadstool Boardroom in the books. We're a weekly show here on Thursdays at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. You can email us, answer that question, toadstoolboardroom@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter at ToadstoolBR. I almost forgot. I promised an answer in the Star Fox segment to why I have 9 copies of Star Fox Guard. And I did not deliver that answer. So let me do that right now. And the answer to that question is I collect Wii U games because I love the Wii U. And there was a time where I was like, I want some backup cases in case like I find a game with a gross case or a GameStop and a black case that I can swap into a blue case. And GameStop was selling Star Fox Guard for 99 cents each. So I just bought a bunch of them. And then I only had to ever swap out one of them that I have in this now black case. I don't remember even what Wii U game it was that I swapped out. But yeah, one of them I swapped out into the blue case. And then I stopped collecting Wii U games because Devil's Third is $500, and I'm not going to buy that.
That was going to be my question. Are there any Wii U games that like have escaped you at this point? Like, are there any that aren't in your collection and you're like, I would genuinely like to own that and play it?
Yeah, I only care about, I didn't quantify this. I only care about Nintendo published Wii U games was what I was going for. And Devil's Third is really the only one that I don't have that kind of stopped me. But then, because of how expensive Devil's Third was, I stopped collecting other ones. So there's a couple I don't have. Like, a shockingly expensive one is Mario and Sonic, the 2016 Rio Olympic Games on Wii U.
Weird.
It's like $90, $90 to $100.
Wow.
I'm just not going to pick that up.
No.
So, and then there's some that I have on Switch that I never got on Wii U, like Tokyo Mirage Sessions. I don't have the Wii U version of that, but oh, whatever.
Isn't the Switch one better?
Yeah, which is like I don't know.
Yeah.
Get the so many.
That's not what collecting is about.
Switch now. Yeah. So it kind of fizzled out. But now I'm left with this awesome collection of Star Fox cards. All right. Anyways, let's wrap this thing up. You can find Chris online at
Koreis93.
Justin, welcome to the boardroom. Go on Twitter, give him a shout. You can find him at
Koreis at Koreis.
And you can find myself at Logan J. Plant. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great week, and we'll catch you next time right here in the Toadstool Boardroom.